Awesome. And Neil, I'll ask you to come off mute. Neil's our invited speaker today, talking all things events and how to do it the right way, and maybe how what people do to not do it the right way. But Neil, I'll kick it over to you. And folks, as you're listening here, go ahead and just add any questions that you've got in the chat, and we'll hit those along the way and at the end. Neil, thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Spencer, for having me. Appreciate it. So, yeah, it's a topic when I spoke with Spencer a couple of weeks ago that obviously resonates with myself as a financial services individual, work in the business for over 38 years. Been to a lot of conferences throughout my career, which is something which inspired me to build my own company, which is now called Jabboy Productions. So, I started back in 2009 and I built it for at that point where I was working in the broker dealer side, just out of the need to educate the financial advisors that were at the firm, not only to sell variable annuities, we had real estate, we had private credit, we had a whole bunch of alternative investments. And the firm was mostly made up of transactional advisors, meaning they were selling stocks, bonds, options. They really knew nothing about what alternative investments and a lot of these insurance strategies were. So the way we educated them was to put these conferences together. We grew the firm from 15 advisors to over 200 plus advisors. Revenue significantly increased because of the educational component and the way that we designed the conference. And then again, following the path of what we did, built revenue awareness. In 2018, my company started doing events specifically for the family office, independent registered investment advisor, pension plans, celebrities, and other high net worth individuals. It was very unique in the fact that we never really believed in that concept of speed dating and breakout rooms and things like that. We just feel like if everybody's going to come, that everybody should have an opportunity to listen to the content that's provided at the conference. And I've been to many conferences, and that was the biggest pet peeve I had, that there would be three or four breakout room choices. I would have an interest in maybe one or two, but you can't be at more than one place at the same time. So I kind of felt like if I don't pick the right one, then I'm going to miss out and ultimately scramble if I can to get to the other one to maybe catch a little glimpse of what was happening in the next room. So the platform that we designed is, like I said, all general session allows everybody to hear. And we have speakers on everything from real estate, credit, commodities, gold, oil, you name it, tax strategies, economy. So, the whole idea was to build something that would allow people, number one, to get education, secondarily, to build relationships, and lastly, obviously, to create deal flow. And we have accomplished all of that because, again, the room that we create is specifically built with that in mind. We're never going to have more of the sell side than the buy side. And that to me is important for any of you out there that's looking to participate in conferences. A lot of these events, unfortunately, they're just looking to get as many sponsors as they can. I'm hearing and I see, a lot of these events have 85% of the room is filled with the sell side. So think about it. If you're trying to raise capital or you're trying to raise awareness and now you're in a pool full of sharks, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So we try to stay away from that. That would be the best advice that I would provide for you is kind of look at the way that these conference providers, design their room. There's a lot of conferences and events that are happening, and unfortunately, it makes the whole environment very difficult to navigate. And that's why, navigating where to go is very important. I think to me, and what I hear when I basically tell sponsors that we work with, that the room is boutique, the room is verified and hand selected and by invitation only, I get always a sigh of relief. And the reason being is that, sponsors or people that are first time looking to get to be in front of capital, it's less intimidating. It's more realistic that you're going to get to meet everybody in the room. And therefore, a handshake is a lot more viable than, the masses, where some people feel like they're more comfortable being in a room full of a lot of people. And I think that that is just maybe due to insecurity. But if you're not insecure, if you want to really network and get to meet the audience, I highly suggest being in a more selective room. And that's kind of how we built it. And again, the makeup of our audience is that family office, independent RIA. The typical advisor has, especially in the RIA side, at least a quarter billion of assets under management. Family offices that we work with are mostly single family offices that have made a ton of money through an exit, whether it's a technology company or real estate company. I would say the average is more than $100 million of investable assets. And the most common thing that we get is that they feel safe in a smaller environment than these bigger environments. Just the reason being is that, like I said before, there's a lot of places to run, a lot of places to hide when there's a lot of people, and then just a lot of moving parts. And you to really feel comfortable in those environments, it's a lot of overwhelming experience. So again, when it comes down to the navigating the landscape, get to know who's out there, find out, where they're basing their panel discussions. That's another thing, right? A lot of these companies are, and it's kind of like I figured it out. A lot of these conferences, what they do is they reverse engineer their conferences based upon panelists. Now think about this. So they promise everybody a panel spot, and that is just to basically fill the room with people. But most panelists are on the sell side. They may say that they're an investor, but a lot of them are, disguised as selling something, and they're coming to these conferences. They're being on panels. You see panel discussions of 10 people on an individual panel. They do these panels with, 10 of them throughout the conference. If you do the math, that's 100 people. But those people are not coming to really invest. They're coming to be on a panel so they can use that for their own purposes, right? For their own social media, for their own marketing campaign to say that they're an elite speaker at a specific conference. They're not really coming to invest. They're coming again for, like I said, their own self-serving purposes. And I see that very often in a lot of conferences. And I tried to model that because I know a lot of these conferences and I know people that go to them and they call me up and I tell them what our process is and I deny them a spot at our panel and they get frustrated. Like, why not? I just spoke and they list 5 different conferences that they spoke at. And I realize that they're just professional panelists. That's all they
Hmm.
want to do. They just want to be on different panels. They want to go and they want to say that they're at Opals or these other conferences that are out there just for the sake of their own potential market. And I actually look away from that. I look away from what we call the conference hopper. An attendee that calls me and he brags about every conference he's been to that prior week. To me, that's a red flag. A lot of people like to brag about that, but if you've got nothing but time to go to a conference, to me, that means that you're probably looking either just to build into your network or you're looking to sell something to build into whatever you're out there trying to raise capital for or raise awareness for. So, the one great thing about conferences, the relationship building is something you should take seriously. It's one thing that AI is not going to take over. AI is not going to get rid of the human interaction. And just like Spencer and even myself, during COVID times, we focused on the technology of what we're looking at now, which is the Zoom. But again, the Zoom is real time. You get to see people and hear their experiences and listen, like we did just before with the breakout rooms. You get to really kind of engage, but there's nothing like a handshake or getting to know somebody face to face. So for that, I mean, like I said, it's a great platform to get out there and meet people, to add to your personal networks, to raise awareness of who you are and what you're doing. But I've spoken for a while now. Any questions? I see that there's some things in the chat, but Spencer, any questions that you have for me?
Well, let's jump in with Pat. Had a question. What's your go-to first question when meeting someone new? So this is kind of like working the room a little bit.
Yeah, so again, I would always be more selective on the conferences and events you go to. The one thing I like to do is I always go onto my LinkedIn before I go into a room, and you can actually download your own QR code. I don't know if you've done that before, but it's a QR code that you can actually download and you can use that. You screenshot it and you use that when you meet somebody and you immediately say, hey, listen, let's exchange who we are. And we do that through, they can scan your QR code, you can scan their QR code and connect with them to make sure you actually lock in who they are. I think that's important because you go and you're going to meet a lot of people throughout a conference. So it's good to remember that. The second thing is to get as much as the contact information as you can, whether or not is, now these iPhones, you can just put it next to another iPhone and automatically zooms over your contact information. And what I suggest is that you immediately, because if you just do that and without any engagement, you're going to lose the contact. It'll be in your contact list, but you're not going to remember who you talked to. So as soon as you zoom that over, it's going to pop up either the image if they put it there in their contact information. Immediately send a text message saying, "Hey, it was great talking to you just now about whatever it was, whether it's about we have friends in common or whatever the topic is." And this way, those will show up in your text messages. So this way, you don't just lose it. Because I did that before when I first, found that feature. And I came back to my office and I was like, oh my God, I never really realized who I connected with. Now you got to go search and remember. So always remember to do that. And like you said, a lot of that helpfulness will be coming from the QR code that you can get from LinkedIn to then cross-reference who they are on LinkedIn to see what company they are. You should most likely be able to see their photo and then assimilate who that is that you connected with via text message.
Love that. Yeah, love that. Okay, we got a question then from Arjun. How can you attract interactions versus having to approach individuals? So are you saying like whether you go and put yourself into a conversation or whether you're the most interesting person in the room and then people are coming to you? What's the angle there with your question?
I think
Exactly.
that a really cool thing, and again, I deal with a guy that comes to a lot of our events, and he has this thing. It's called he's a storyteller, and I've been a storyteller since I started in the business, and I think that's what made me shine as a person, raising money and obviously building awareness for conference. So you should always have a story, whether or not it's a story about your life, a story about your kids, a story about something that is unique, even a story about your way that you got to the event. It's funny, we had a guy that presented at our conference a couple months ago, and right before he got to the conference, his beautiful Rolls Royce nearly avoided running into a deer. The car in front of him actually hit the deer, killed the deer, and he wound up running over the foot of the deer. It was a crazy story. But he wound up calling, and calling obviously the police and had to, sit there, and it was really almost an hour late for the conference. But when he showed up, let me tell you, he was just sweating and he looked like, he had this crazy look on his face and he told everybody the story. And you know what? He became the hit of the conference. Not that I'm telling everybody should come close to hitting a deer, but just like the story of your day or something like that, that you can just really break the ice with, right? Not about pitching who you are, what you're doing, but just a story. Maybe over the Easter weekend, you just had something experience with your grandkids, your kids when you went Easter bunny, egg hunting, whatever it is. I think there's nothing better than becoming the shining star in a room by having a great story. It's a great icebreaker. It's a great way to take the pressure off of somebody having to say, hey, what do you do? What are you trying to sell? It kind of just lightens the load of that. And again, it'll bring people to attract to you to want to hear more. And they feel like you've got a personality. And I think that if you can showcase your personality before whatever you're trying to sell, whatever your real intentions are, it's going to be helpful in the long run.
Great point. Other questions?
I see Molly's coming on over here. Any other questions? Because I mean, I can continue a little bit
Go
more
for it, Paul.
dialogue if you'd like me
Paul had
to
a hand raised there. Go for it, Paul.
Yeah, instead of writing it out because I'm a two-finger typer, so it'll take me too long. Um, Basically, my question kind of was as well, like about what's your prep for conferences? I know in cases where I've gone to ones where I've kind of done pre-meetings, arranged all that kind of stuff, they've been more successful. But I also find that you need to kind of like factor in a little bit of a buffer there because things happen, and everything gets delayed 5 minutes because a conversation runs over. I wanted to hear how you handle that, Neil.
No, absolutely. I think it's great to advertise if you're going to a particular conference beforehand, whatever conference. And if you use a program like Calendly or something like that, you can put in, hey, I'm going to be at like my conference, a Jaboy Productions conference in San Juan, Puerto Rico. If you're going to be there, let's connect. And then just a link to your calendar. And then you'll be surprised at how many people on LinkedIn, first of all, either if they're not coming, then you raise awareness. And if they want to meet you, it gives them a platform of a place that they can meet you face to face. And it gives you valuability that you're actually going to a conference that you're looking to educate and whatever. That's one way to do it. The second way is when you're there, again, maybe even reserve something like a table in a restaurant. And I've heard it, and it's worked for a lot of my people where they just reserve an area and they say, we're going to have appetizers at 6 o'clock when I come in. Let's have chips and dip and whatever it's going to be on the table. And as you meet the right people, you say, hey, listen, nice to meet you. Hey, it's 6 o'clock this evening. I've got a small table at the lounge or at the restaurant, whatever it's going to be. Come and meet me and others like yourself that want to just connect offline, and we can grab a drink and maybe some quick appetizers.
Just one follow-on question from that there, actually, because I was going to inquire what your position on kind of doing like side events almost. So you're kind of touched on that now. Um, like I've heard about a lot of people. I was at a big conference in November, for example, called the Web Summit in Portugal, and the event itself was almost a little bit overwhelming. A bit to your point about like it being huge and stuff. It was nearly too big. And a lot of the business actually got done at the side events and the night events and that type of thing. And I just wanted to get your thoughts. I know a lot of organizers aren't big fans of side events because they feel they're piggybacking on their hard work without actually maybe having booths and different things. So just wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say as long as you're not conflicting with the organizer's time frame. So, like, let's say, for example, I'm doing a welcome and reception with all the group at 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. If you did a side event at 6:15, I'll probably be upset. If you did it at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, where there's a gap where there's nothing happening, I mean, go at it. I'd rather you do that and have something that's going to be productive for you. I think it becomes complicated. I've had issues where groups were doing events aside at the same time of our networking or content on our agenda. That becomes obviously a conflict, and you don't want to see that. And then you become a thorn in the side of the conference provider. But as long as you're doing something, like I said, even if you come in, I had a group we just did in Switzerland. He intentionally stayed an extra day. And as he did it, he basically just met everybody who had a late flight out. He did a small breakfast and he invited everybody to come to his breakfast and sit down with him. And it worked out great. He had 15 people at breakfast, people that had flights that were not, at 10 o'clock in the morning. They were 3, 4 in the afternoon. And you know what? Everybody had something to do. Therefore, he became the shining star, had 15 people with him to meet. And again, this was just something that he just off the cuff did during the conference. So you just take a look at the agenda or the timing and make it to your advantage. A lot of conferences like we do excursions on our longer events. Take advantage of, maybe even inviting some people that do the excursions to do something different. Like maybe you invite them to join your group to walk together or do something different. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do. But again, if you conflict, it probably is going to be something of a sore thumb. But if you're not, if you're adding value to yourself and to your own business, it doesn't interfere with the agenda. I don't think any conference provider is going to, be afraid of that.
Good points. Neil, talk to us about more of the follow-up that we do the day after, the week after, the month after.
Right. Well, that's obviously the selection of the conferences is most difficult, right? But a conference, no matter what conference you go to, if you don't follow up, it's just a waste of your time. I think that the most important thing is that everybody that you meet at the event, you should have some kind of interaction, whether it's a thank you or a picture of you and that person. And I forgot to mention that. That's another thing that's great to do. When I mentioned you zap your phones together, another great idea is you basically take a selfie with that person right there. And that text message could be that selfie of you and that person with a quick commentary, like great meeting you at, Thursday at whatever event. Again, now you have the photo, you can share it, they can look back at it and have a memory of you and that individual. So that's another great idea. But again, when you follow up, also you can be like referencing, hey, listen, this is, remember here, look at the photo. It's you and I, making a funny face together at, whatever the cocktail reception is. But definitely follow up. Like I said, connect with as many people as you can on LinkedIn. Just an email if you can to everybody, just thanking them for their time and suggesting some type of follow-up meeting, or maybe just finding out what they've got, that they're working on, or I think that what I've found in the high net worth arena, that people don't like to be sold right off the bat. It's a major turnoff. But I think that the one thing that they appreciate is people getting to know who they are. And if you think about it, right, most of these people like yourself are founders, they're CEOs, they're high net worth athletes, or whatever it's going to be. They all have a story. And I think that people really want to deal with people that want to get to know who they are, on top of just being a person that has got their hand out. Because first of all, it looks self-serving, and secondarily, it looks like you're desperate. I think that the best way to sell, what I've learned, is not to sell. And think about that. The economic impact is going to be greater if you psychologically make people think that you don't really need their business, right? Any place that you went into, right? If you think about it, your own personal life, the places that probably you felt like, you know what, they're not even asking me if I want a salesperson or whatever, you probably more have demand for that product or that store than you do for the guy that immediately when you walk in, they're jumping on you. And think about that, right? It's sometimes scary, and especially if you're a high net worth person, everybody's probably got their hand out to do business with you. Everybody wants to know how they can get money out of you, whether or not it's to invest or whether or not it's to collaborate. But if you befriend these people, that seems to be what's working. Everybody that I know that really has been successful in the family office, independent RIA world, has become friendly with those people who are the attendees. And it works. I mean, I know that. I've had people that are now come to my conferences 5 years ago that they're out there skiing together in the Alps, or their families are doing Easter dinner or Christmas dinners together. And I see that happening. And to me, that makes me excited because it just proves out the point that people want to build relationships. People want friends, right? A lot of high net worth people, the hardest thing is for them to have friends because why? Everybody wants something from them. And if you're the other side of it, if you're the person that's just trying to get to know who they are, get to know their family, it becomes a whole different way of approaching getting investments from them.
Awesome. Okay. Other questions?
Any
All
other
right.
questions?
So, Neil, you just came back from this hosting this event in Switzerland. You're hosting one in San Juan. Um, what are you hoping that your guests come away from the event with? What are your goals with hosting the event?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I love when I design a conference, it's very much in line for something that I would like to attend. So we're really known for our speakers and the content. So our events are very diverse. I wouldn't even call them a sales conference. I consider them to be, and the theme of our conference has always been since we started, invest in yourself. And invest in yourself with the theme there. If you look at Warren Buffett, he'll always tell you, if you're going to do something, if you're going to be present at an event or at a meeting, you should be investing in yourself. Because anybody of substance or high net worth, they continually want to learn. And the way you learn is you basically continue to talk to new people and you meet people and you discuss topics that are relevant. So that's important to me. So, for example, we just did Zurich. We had 50, I would call them somewhat billionaires in a room. It's inspiring to be around that audience, but we also have speakers talking about brain health. We're talking about memory loss. We have wellness and health, things that are relevant right now. And I'm really excited about our conference coming up May 3rd through the 5th in San Juan. The reason being is that we've got some incredible speakers, but I think more importantly, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in the world that there's probably no better time to talk about what you have or talk about what's going on in the world, because there's things that with this war in Iran that if it doesn't end soon, there's a lot of economic impact that's going to affect us all. So I think that right now, as I was talking, some of our speakers for that event in San Juan include Harry Dent. I'm not sure if you ever heard of Harry Dent, but Harry Dent's been an economist, wrote a bunch of books. We also have Sharon Lechter. Sharon Lechter is the individual that co-wrote the book, Thinking, what is it, for Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We have John Najarian. We have Mike Maloney, which has a whole program on gold and silver and commodity investing. We have a couple other, really high profile speakers, which are coming to really talk about the economy, talking about what's happening overseas. And to me, that's really relevant right now. And again, like I said, it's all about the invest in yourself to kind of learn, be inspired, and walk away with ideas that you can, implement in your business, whether or not it's saving taxes or growing your assets. There's different strategies that obviously are discussed throughout the conference. And there'll be investment opportunities too, right? We're going to have groups that are talking about hospitality investing or multifamily investing or, investing right now in private credit or private equity. There's a whole bunch of things that need some visibility. And I think that's the real benefit is to come out and get the knowledge. And from there, you can determine what's right for you.
Awesome. Okay, last call. I'll just read this comment from Kevin because in case some are driving or can't see it, but that was pretty good at Silicon. He says at Silicon Slopes a few years ago, Paul Shin, he's a local community maker here and just awesome guy. He says, shook my hand, introduced himself, and asked me, "What are you hoping to get out of this conference?" And I've always thought it was a thoughtful question that allowed me to explain why I was there. Yeah, great, great way to break the ice.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to make it as though you're not there just to sell, right? You have to really either turn it around where you're about there to meet them or, how you can help enhance their life and vice versa.
Yeah. All right. Well, Neil, this was educational for me. I appreciate you coming out and sharing some wisdom. You've got a lot of years of experience here in this, and it's awesome. So I appreciate you coming and sharing with our group here today.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. We're here
Th-
every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. Please come back.
Have a great day, everybody. Hope to see you all soon.
Thanks.
Thanks,
So
everyone.
long.
Take care. All right, bye-bye.